Hola, mi amigos. Yo soy St.Christopher. This is The Woodsman, and this is The Writer's Block, a book review show where I tell you if a book is good enough that I would recommend it to a friend, or so bad that I would chop it in half with an axe. Today on The Writer's Block, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I think it was Socrates who said, "I think, therefore I am." And it was the great philosopher David Goggins who asked the question, who is going to lift the boats and the logs? This book is a biography about an, ex-Navy SEAL now, about a former Navy SEAL and his rough childhood. Rough might be an understatement. He had a jagged childhood. A very abusive father who would beat his brother and his mother. It talks about them growing up in a town and then finally his mother escaping with him, and his brother stays behind. It talks about him getting into the Air Force, then kind of becoming complacent, falling back into civilian life, powerlifting his way up to 300 pounds while eating donuts and drinking chocolate milkshakes. And then one day in his sorry life of spraying for cockroaches, he goes home and he sees a documentary about Navy SEALs. He wants a higher purpose for his life. He tries to run a mile, but only gets about a block down before he stops, quits, slugs his ass back onto the couch, and drinks his chocolate milkshake. But in the ever-determined mind of David Goggins, he gets up and tries again. This book is about him going through the process of becoming a Navy SEAL. He goes through Hell Week 3 times, and then it advances past that point in his life to where he is working as a recruiter and entering ultra events. And I think that is pretty much what the book is about for the second half. He's running 100-mile races. He's running 250-mile races. There's a great quote that he has in an interview where a guy goes, "You run for hours," and David Goggins goes, "Days." So David Goggins, as an internet personality, is a bald ultra runner who yells at his camera while his wife is filming him. "Hey honey, how's it going?" "You gotta fucking run." "You gotta go harder." The first half of this book is captivating because you're getting an introduction to who this person is. Inside the book, they have pictures of David Goggins as he's growing up. So not only do you get a feel for his thoughts, but you also get a visual image of who you are talking to. I will also say that this book was ghostwritten by a man named... The man's name is Adam Skolnick. If you were to visualize him, picture of Will Smith if you were looking at Will Smith through a fisheye lens. He has written for Lonely Planet, which is a magazine, and he's done another novel on freediving. He ghost wrote this with David Goggins, and I have to give him a shout out because David Goggins' name is plastered all over this, and this man is nowhere to be seen. He is a proper ghostwriter, but his writing credentials elevate this book to a new level. It is one thing to go, "I ran really far and it fucking sucked. I got in the water and it was cold." With his, artistic touch, you have lines like when they go into the water during Bud's training, he goes, "It was like a string of pearls on a necklace as a bunch of bald heads bobbed in the Pacific surf." It's stuff like that that just elevates it to an extra level. And that brings me to the next point. While this book itself, a material package, is great because you get to see all the photos, the audiobook of this novel also brings it to a different level. The book is narrated by the writer, and after every chapter they will stop and David Goggins is in studio and he'll break it down. So they're going through Bud's training and he'll just stop the book and go, "So David, what were you thinking during this moment?" And you get a little bit more insight. It's like someone coming in doing an interview for the book while someone is reading the entire book. It is worlds ahead, and it brings this beautiful personalized touch to the audiobook version of this novel. What is the point of this book, you might be asking? I think a lot of people get confused because of the lifestyle that David Goggins lives, with him absolutely destroying his body in pursuit of hardening his mind. I will say, in this book, he gives sound advice. He's not saying to go up and sign up for a 100-mile race with no training. He is saying, do 10% increment increases when you're doing your training. He gives proper advice for how you're supposed to increase your endurance training. Personally, in the storyline, I think this book peaks in the middle. There is one chapter where he is trying to sign up for this hard race, and the race director wants him to do a 100-mile race before he signs up. So on 2 weeks' notice, he signs up for this 24-hour race in an attempt to run 100 miles. The night before, he does a bunch of squats and heavy deadlifts, and then he shows up to the race with a box of Ritz crackers and some Myoplex. It is this torturous experience that he is explaining, trying to run 100 miles. There's also a beautiful illustration in the book of what he looked like. This dude is 230 pounds, jacked, and he's beside this like tiny 100-pound Asian woman who's running beside him, and he's keeping pace with. He manages to go 70 miles before like completely breaking down, and then manages to go the extra 30. This to me is the hardest feat of the book. Like, he goes through Hell Week 3 times, but this is just, he is completely unprepared for it, and he is just pushing himself to the ends of his wits, breaking his feet in the process, and yet still accomplishing the task. That happens somewhere in the middle, and then after that it's like, and then he ran a triathlon, and then he ran like a really hard race. It's very interesting, but the fucking dramatic moment of someone pushing past their limits, which they are so totally unprepared for. He's never run anything more than a marathon. That, for me, is this beautiful elevated point that comes in the middle of the book. Obviously, it's an autobiography, so you can't just like, let's just say I did this afterwards. But for me, it has this odd structure where it peaks in the middle. The other stories are still entertaining. I think they touch upon a really interesting aspect, the recruitment phase of his military career. He is put into recruitment to go out and try and enlist more African Americans, and that is where David Goggins really gets his salesmanship. He goes out to all these schools, he preaches his own life story, what he's been through, and then he says, you can become great. All you have to do is join the Navy. Really, all he's done is do the same thing. He's telling you his story. He's telling you all of his hardships. Instead, he's saying, and you can be great. Just buy my book. Great salesmanship. And so, I was going to raise my teeth. And so, the main point of this story, it goes back to this one quote in the first quarter of the novel. What is this book about? What is he trying to accomplish? It's in page 141, the chapter Armored Mind. Physical training is the perfect crucible to learn how to manage your thought process, because when you're working out, your focus is more likely to be single-pointed, and your response to stress and pain is immediate and measurable. Do you hammer hard and snag that personal best like you said you would, or do you crumble? That decision rarely comes down to physical ability. It's almost always a test of how well you are managing your own mind. If you push yourself through each split and use that energy to maintain a strong pace, you have a great chance of recording a faster time. Granted, some days it's easier to do that than others, and the clock or the score doesn't matter anyway. The reason it's important to push hardest when you want to quit the most is because it helps you callous your mind. It's the same reason you have to do your best work when you are the least motivated. So, with that being said, I think the purpose of this book is kind of camouflage with all of this working out. He is running 100-mile races, he's going through buds 3 times, he's doing all of this physical activity. But the point of it is not to become this super athlete. It is to harden his mind and create a better mindset so that when you come on to other tasks, you can transfer what you've done in those physical hurdles and take the lessons from them to apply to other things. The reason why he's choosing physical tasks is because physical tasks do not lie. You can read books and like flip through them and go like, I've read 100 books. But if you're saying that I ran 100 miles, you can't just skip over a lap. You have to do the entire thing. And it is a very concrete way of sharpening your mind. Anything else? In the book, there's like some military stuff. He talks about like getting deployed, but there's no war stories. It's all ultra training. This dude just loves to work out and stay hard. One of the things he said is like, every step I take, I get harder. God forbid this guy became a porn star. Anyway, great book, great lessons in it. Each chapter ends with a little exercise that he's giving you so that you can work on yourself. So it gets off the block.